I'm joined now for a CitrusTV exclusive interview with the former student body president at Pepperdine University, and perhaps slightly more importantly, the Congressman for New York's 22nd Congressional District, Republican Brandon Williams. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, glad to be here, Luke. Thanks.
So I want to start right there because I think it's really interesting for someone who is on campus now. Why did you decide to run for student body president at Pepperdine, and what issues do you see happening on college campuses today?
Well, that's a good question. At the time, the tuition was too darn high. It was too hard for students to get student aid, and many of my friends struggled to stay on campus. And I had several friends that had to leave because, like at Syracuse, like other schools, it was a private school that I attended. And new student orientation, believe it or not, was something I was really passionate about, of kind of revamping new student orientation, and we were able to do that in student government. So that's what I ran on. I hadn't thought of that in a long time.
Yeah. You also, I want to get back to campus issues a little later on, but you also stepped up to serve in the Navy, and we thank you for that service. When you're on a nuclear submarine, which you were, you're under a lot of pressure, both literally and figuratively. So what did you learn in your time in the military that has helped you manage stress in your current job?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, staying very focused on the mission and the task. You can imagine on a nuclear submarine, there's not a lot of, room for self-expression and to get all of your emotions involved. And I think that's similar to our nation that's also under a lot of pressure right now. Removing a lot of the emotion from the dialogue and trying not to trigger people. That's kind of my approach, and I think it helps me stay pretty grounded.
Yeah. Before we move on to some more policy-based issues, I want to talk about a stressful time and kind of address the elephant in the room, which is that video from last fall where you confronted two of your former staffers. That incident made some national headlines for our community, and arguably for the wrong reasons. So with the benefit of hindsight, would you handle that situation differently?
We've really moved on from all of that. It hasn't, been an issue. I think I think everybody knows that politics is a really dirty business, and there's no reason that should spill over to my family, and which is just inappropriate. And so standing up for my family is something I'll always do and proud to do. But I've not. You're the first one to bring that issue up in conversation in the last 3 months. To be honest. So I'm not sure that it's really an issue.
Yeah. You're starting to do town halls again this week after an 11-month break. Do you enjoy doing these meetings, and what have you learned from hearing constituent concerns?
That's a great question, Luke. Town halls are terrific. Our system of government requires a dialogue. It's the way the founders set up our form of government, that the government is very close. It's representative of the people. And that means that you have to have a conversation. What's difficult about those is that there's a lot of people that don't want to have a conversation. They want to shout. They want to drown out other opinions or try to intimidate those. And frankly, I just am not easy to intimidate. And I'm just here to answer questions like I am for you. Just answer questions as directly as I can.
Yeah, and we appreciate you being here. When you talk about a dialogue, one of the rules that you've had in place from the beginning of those town halls is that attendees have to write down their questions on a note card beforehand. I think there have been some people who've asked, why not let those folks ask you questions directly?
Well, that is asking directly. I mean, there's a lot of forms of expression, and writing your questions down and asking directly is direct. Sorry, can't come up with another word there. When you start giving the microphone to people, what ends up is that people aren't necessarily concise in their questions. They haven't necessarily thought through their questions as directly, and forcing people to write them down actually helps, I think, direct the questions. It makes it more enjoyable and informative for everyone that's in attendance. And I think it also prevents people trying to commandeer a town hall, which really ends up being a disservice to the people that have come out to have this kind of engagement. You will see in our town halls, we don't we don't shirk away from hard questions or, cherry pick questions only to softballs. We tend to take on all the questions to the greatest extent that we can. And I think people end up walking away with a much clearer picture of who I am, where I stand on issues, and feel like they've been heard. But the truth is, a lot of people just want the mic because they want to shout to the other members of the audience instead of engage in this dialogue. And so that's kind of the balance of, how do you create a forum that is best for everyone who's frankly taken the time to attend.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question about your critics before I move on, if I can. Oneida County Executive Anthony Picenti told me in an interview that you are, quote, not familiar with the community. How do you respond to criticism like that from a prominent elected official in your own party? And what conversations have you had with the county executive about that?
The job of a county executive is so different from, being a member of Congress. He literally controls $500 million budget. He's got hundreds of employees, and he has his pulse on the day-to-day operations, of the county. And that's a huge responsibility. And so, in Congress, most of my, job is to be down in D.C. and to represent the people in that forum and being there. The truth is that I do spend a lot of time in Oneida County. I spent a lot of time at Rome Labs and Griffiths, and we've invested a whole lot in having an office in Utica, so we have a permanent presence there all the time. And we may not overlap. We don't necessarily coordinate events together. I tend to go in places maybe that aren't necessarily as critical for a local focus, or like I would say a county executive type focus, and more of a federal focus. So we're very present every off day that I'm not in DC. Pretty much I am in the district somewhere. There's 760,000 people in the district. Yeah. And so anyway, that's the way the math works. So if that's his perception, I mean, he's certainly entitled to it. He's the executive of the whole county. But that's how I see it from my perspective.
Do you think he's wrong about that statement, that you're not familiar with the community?
Well, compared to him, I think that's probably rings with some truth, because, he's lived there his whole life and devoted his career to it. And, I live on the other side of the district and have spent only the last couple years of getting familiar with Oneida County. So how could that not be so? How could I be as familiar as him? That's not possible.
Yeah. I'd be happy to grab you a slice of tomato pie sometime in Utica. I love it there. But I want to talk about President Biden has announced plans to visit Syracuse on Thursday, but you've asked him not to come. Why is that?
Well, frankly, I attended both officers' funerals in the last 72 hours, and it's one of the greatest honors of my life to be there, and also one of the most difficult experiences. Just the weight of our whole community, and particularly the law enforcement community, coming to bear in such a raw and powerful way. It is, frankly, it's a big burden. When the president visits, it requires 150 law enforcement personnel to support a presidential visit. And so this is 150 officers on top of their regular duties that they have to bring in for overtime and additional pay in order to support the president. There's just obviously a big security presence for a presidential visit. Yeah. Listen, I'm all for President Biden coming and celebrating the Micron grant. $6 billion is something certainly to celebrate. And I compliment him. I compliment Chuck Schumer and particularly Ryan McMahon on the success of that. I've played my own role in my role as chairman of the Energy Subcommittee and participating in the Science Committee. But the time is not right now. Many officers have spoken out, and they've spoken to me in my office that they've had to cancel family plans. They've had to cancel well-earned time off and vacation. And the last thing I'll just say is I can't thank the state troopers enough, the state police, for stepping in to fill the gap for what looks like the president's going to do. But I think it's a mistake, and I've asked him not to come and just to postpone that trip. We can all celebrate it another time. Right now, our community is just trying to regroup.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Micron project if I can. Right now, I believe you're on a congressional delegation related to energy issues. Micron's planned facility in Clay is expected to consume 16 billion kilowatt hours of energy per year. Now, they've promised to use 100% renewable energy sources at that plant. Does that sound like a realistic goal to you?
Well, let's look real quick at where renewable energy comes from. New York State actually has excellent renewable resources in hydro plants up in from Niagara, and that's provided us with clean, affordable energy actually for many decades. Now, if you look at the power demands for Micron, the current investment strategy that the governor's pursued, which is primarily in wind and solar, simply doesn't work. And I say that as a nuclear engineer. I say that as, that we've, the math is pretty simple on that wind and solar aren't going to be nearly enough. The answer really is nuclear power. We have 3 power plants up in Ontario, nuclear power plants up on the Lake Ontario. But Governor Cuomo prematurely shut down a nuclear power plant in the Hudson Valley, which is part of the reason that we have this shortage. If there's not enough energy, there will not be a manufacturing plant or any other investment in central New York. So this is a problem that we have to solve. I happen to be a subject matter expert in nuclear power and a big advocate that we have, responsible, reliable, resilient, and affordable energy. And, frankly, that's one of the hallmarks of what I've been working on in Congress.
Yep. Earlier this year, you came out against a bipartisan deal that was negotiated to address the ongoing crisis at the southern border. You called it the Biden re-election bill. Why?
Well, if you remember, we passed H.R. 2, a comprehensive bill to protect our southern border. One of the first things that we did in Congress, that's why the number is 2, at the beginning of the 118th Congress more than a year ago. And the Biden administration did nothing. First of all, the Senate did nothing with that bill. And the Biden administration has really allowed their executive orders, which they very famously made in the first week or two of his administration, that struck down the policies that have created this border crisis. That's why the numbers have shot through the roof. And that it's affected everything, and particularly overwhelmed New York City, and is now affecting our community with fentanyl and all kinds of terrible things.
Yeah, Congressman, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just got the 2-minute warning from your team. So I was just curious,
Sure.
Why do you believe that bill in specific, though, is the Biden re-election bill?
Well, because his bill actually was to allow thousands of people to enter every day. So in other words, he would not stop the crisis as it appears.
Yeah, I think your Republican colleague James Lankford would disagree with you on that. But if the bill...
I actually just spent a week with Senator Lankford, and we spoke about this at length, actually.
Did he seem like someone who wants Biden to be reelected? If you're saying that's the Biden reelection bill, was that something like why do you think that bill that he wrote would help Joe Biden get reelected? How would it do that?
It would do that by perpetuating the inflow of illegal immigrants into our country. And that's actually what's driving the crisis that we're facing.
You think having an open border would help Joe Biden get reelected?
I think for him to have a bill that allows the same effect as an open border and yet pretends to do something, yes, I think that would help Joe Biden get elected.
Okay, I want to wrap up with some campus issues, if I can, that are really important to our audience. You've criticized the Biden administration for their efforts to cancel student loan debt and equated it to buying votes. Why do you say that, and what efforts do you support to help lower the cost of college, which we discussed earlier is very high?
Sorry, those are 2 questions. Can you repeat the second question?
Yeah, so the first question is, why do you say that the Biden administration is buying votes with their plan? I know a lot of people disagree with the Biden plan. I want to hear why you do. And then also, what efforts do you support to help lower the cost of college?
Well, I think the answer to your first is that it is buying votes. I think it's transparent and obvious. And I would like to hear an argument to suggest that it's not buying votes. That would be interesting because it's just prima facie, it's obvious on the face of it that that's what's happening. In terms of lowering the cost of college, there's so many good models out there. First of all, is college for everyone? I think there's a lot of efforts to expand what Pell Grants can be used for, including training into the trades, which is historically wonderful time to have a career in the trades, and being able to help people achieve that is, I think, be helpful for our economy and help families be able to provide for fantastic careers. But I think that a lot of the cost of college is being driven by the availability of getting lots of loans, and I think there's been a real push for the last 15 or 18 years that has suggested that college is the answer for everyone, and clearly it's not. And so one of the things that we introduced in Congress, that I introduced, was a bill to actually lower the cost of college. And there's a number of provisions that probably don't have time to get into, but those are the kinds of things that, in answer to your question, that Congress is looking at. And I think everybody realizes that it's not sustainable. The path that college is on is not sustainable. It's not sustainable for middle-class families, and it's really unfairly burdening people as they start off their careers.
Yeah, you've also worked on the
Luke,
Ed and Workforce Committee.
I appreciate your time. I know we're over time. I really
appreciate it. I wanted to get one in about your work on FAFSA, if possible.
Knock yourself out. I just got the sign from our team, but
no worries. Listen, I know that was something that you really wanted to emphasize. You've worked really hard on the Ed and Workforce Committee to help streamline the process for applying for FAFSA aid. We'll talk about those efforts and what you're hoping will be done to make that process more streamlined for folks that are trying to apply.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I think there's so many of your listeners and your audience are struggling with the FAFSA application. My family did that, for a time. I think, we gave the Department of Education a lot of money to streamline and to stand up an application to do this online. I come from the tech industry. I know that it's not a simple problem to solve, but they made lots of promises, the Department of Education did, that they were going to be ready. And then they missed those deadlines, and then they missed further deadlines. And now there's literally like 9 million American families are struggling with the FAFSA application. And it's created a lot of uncertainty about what their college future looks like. And it's just not fair. And my real question, Luke, I think you would appreciate this, is that where's the accountability? When the government continues to fail to deliver, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House, when the government fails to deliver, where's the accountability? And I think we all see that there is none. No consequences for failing. There's no consequences for harming 9 million American families. None. And listen, none of us think that that's the right thing to do. That's one of the reasons that I got into Congress, and I hope to make a difference. Congressman, you've been incredibly generous with your time. Thank you so much. I look forward to getting that tomato pie, and I'm sure we'll ask you about a lot more issues as the campaign progresses. Thank you so much. All right, sir. Yeah, have a good day. Thanks. Take care. Have a good one.